In this video, I'm going to talk to you about what the damaging effects of excess sugar are on your body, as well as where you find hidden sources of sugar and what to do about it, including healthy swaps as well. Most children and adults actually consume 17 teaspoons of added sugar every single day. That is double the amount that the government recommends that we should be consuming in added sugar form. And I'll talk about what I mean by added sugar in a bit more detail. But first off, let's talk about what the first ill effect that sugar can have on your body. And that is most notably weight gain. Why is sugar having this impact on weight gain? Now, a lot of people would just say it's because you're consuming too much of those calories in sugar. And whilst that is true, it definitely adds to the energy intake of the food that you consume every single day. There are a few unique things about sugar that make it easier for you to gain the weight. And the first thing is palatability. So because sugar is something that we evolutionarily are designed to crave, to search out for, this in our brain lights up certain regions that promote dopamine, which means that we absolutely love it. Whether or not it's addictive or not is a bit of a controversial question, but we do know we freaking love it. So that palatability, the reason why we overconsume sugar, can be put down to the fact that we are designed to crave it. The other thing is that sugar actually lacks fiber. So when you're having the teaspoons of sugar that are put into breads and sauces and all that stuff, we don't have the fiber that sugar is naturally found in our environment. So fruit, yes, has sugar in the form of fructose, but it also has fiber. When you have sugar in the form of corn, for example, or beets, which is where sugar is largely derived from, particularly in the States, those products generally have a lot of fiber in. But when you strip it away, you're just getting the sugar. So why is fiber important? Why is the lack of fiber with the sugar actually causing us to overeat? And the reason why is because when you consume fiber, you're actually supporting your microbes. So imagine this is your digestive tract, the hollow tube that starts at your mouth, winds around your body to stomach, small intestine, large intestine, and out the other end. In the large intestine, which is where you have a big population of microbes, including bacteria, fungi, yeast, these little critters are responsible for doing a whole bunch of things, reducing inflammation, improving your mood, but they also create and nourish the colonic cells. And the way in which they do that is that they create this mucin layer. It's literally called a mucin layer, and it kind of does what it says in the tin. It's a mucus layer. Now, within this mucus layer, you have different cells, and what do they produce? They produce something called GLP-1. If you think you've heard of GLP-1 before, you've probably heard it because everyone's been talking about GLP-1 agonists over the last couple of years. Wegovy, semaglutide, that's the generic name for it, or Ozempic. What does that do? It signals to your brain that you are satiated, that you've had enough food. We have natural GLP-1 agonists in the form of these cells that live along the brush border. And what do they feed on? They feed on fiber. So if you have tons of sugar without the fiber, you're not getting that natural GLP-1 signal that goes to your brain that tells you that you're actually satiated. And so you overeat. So going back to this area, the weight gain, it's palatable, it lacks the fiber, and that leads to overconsumption. And actually, if you look at studies, over 30 years of follow-up, people who consume added sugar generally have a lot more weight. 2.3 kilograms on average more than people who have less added sugar. They have greater waist circumference, which is a marker of metabolic health, a crude marker of metabolic health, and a high risk of the diseases of obesity like type 2 diabetes and metabolic syndrome as well. So it's not always because of the sugar per se, it's because of the lack of elements that sugar has. It lacks fiber and it's hyperpalatable. Second thing, and this is super important, it has a negative impact on your liver in the form of creating liver fat. Now, what is your liver? So your liver is an organ that is fantastically important. I'm going to do a crappy stick figure image here of where your liver is. It sits in the right upper quadrant of your abdomen. It's actually a lot larger than people realize. A lot of people think it's just like a small triangle here. It goes up into the diaphragm over the midpoint of your ribs, and it's a huge, huge organ that you can clearly visualize on ultrasound or an MRI, for example. And your liver is responsible for a number of different things. Detoxifying environmental pollutants, it produces hormones, it's uniquely important for sugar regulation. It's actually a major store of sugar from the bloodstream. It creates things like lipoproteins that are proteins that taxi around cholesterol to where it's utilized. It's also an area that we know is under fire. It's under attack because of the excess consumption of sugar and the excess consumption of energy in the form of calories. Why is your liver more at risk of excess sugar? Well, it stores a lot of that excess sugar if you're over consuming it. So particularly from sugar sweetened beverages, there was a meta-analysis of 7 studies, including around 4,000 participants, that those consuming sugar sweetened beverages had a 53% increased risk of developing NAFLD, also known as non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. We've now changed the nomenclature around that particular condition. It's now known as metabolic dysfunction associated steatotic liver disease. You don't really need to know about that, but you might hear it referred to as MADSLD. That's literally how we pronounce it now. What is that? That's associated with type 2 diabetes, and it's where your liver becomes fatty because of the amount of fat it's having to produce to store this excess sugar. We used to think this was only an alcohol-induced condition. Now, the biggest reason that people have this condition of fatty liver is because of excess sugar consumption and excess calorie consumption as well. It's a really, really serious disease, and we're seeing a lot more transplants as a result of poor metabolic health. And sugar is essentially the driving force behind this condition of fatty liver. I'm going to call it fatty liver from now on because I can't say those words over and over again. This is quite alarming because there's a lot that you can throw at your liver, but when you're guzzling these sugar-sweetened beverages, the Cokes, the Pepsis, the familiar brands that I'm sure everyone has come across, the velocity of that sugar going into your bloodstream essentially makes the liver freeze. It's like, what do I do with all this sugar? You've got to quickly store it. You've got to quickly partition it into fat. And unfortunately, fatty liver, or the metabolic dysfunction associated steatotic liver disease, is the result of continual insults of excess sugar going into your bloodstream. Like I said right at the start of this video, a lot of people don't realize the amount of sugar that they're consuming, which is why liver fat is something that we're seeing a lot more of as well. The other thing is ultra-processed foods tend to have a lot of sugar in. So it's not necessarily the sugar that you're putting into your tea, it's going to be the ultra-processed foods that you're consuming, completely unaware that those are great, grand sources of sugar. So fatty liver is one of those things that we always look out for on blood tests, and you can see this as an early sign on liver function tests. So you'll go to your doctors and you'll have something called like an ALT or an AST. They're called liver function tests. There's a bit of a misnomer. They're not necessarily liver function tests, but they are early warning signs of your liver having to struggle. You might also have an ultrasound, but actually an ultrasound will only show a fatty liver when 30% of your liver is full of fat. That's a lot of fat before that's actually demonstrated on an ultrasound. So there are more sensitive techniques that we're looking into now as a screening tool potentially that can show you've got a fatty liver. But the biggest thing that people can do is remove sugar from their diet. And I'm going to talk to you about that in a second as well. And ultra-processed foods, which is a big, big area of where you get sugar in your diet as well. Another issue. So we've done excess weight, we've done fatty liver. A third area, a third risk factor for excess sugar in your diet is poor mental health. We've talked about poor mental health a lot of times, but I don't think people realize that sugar has an association with poor mental health, anxiety, even more severe conditions like schizophrenia that we didn't really think had that much of an association with your diet, definitely has an association with excess sugar as well. Whenever I'm seeing someone with higher stress, anxiety, depression, one of the first things I'm always thinking of is there excess sugar in their diet? 100 grams per day increase in dietary sugar is correlated with a 28% higher prevalence of depression. Now, you might wonder, how on earth is this possible? One of the reasons is when you're having excess sugar in your diet, you're pushing at healthier items in your diet as well. So if you're having too much of the ultra-processed foods, which has all that sugar, or the sugar-sweetened beverages, what are you not eating? What are you not consuming that could be beneficial for your mental health? We talked a lot about the brain-gut axis, or the gut-brain axis. We know from studies that were done by Deakin University and a number of other institutions that what you eat and how you feed your gut can have a meaningful impact on your brain. When you consume foods that are high in fiber, that have polyphenols, a good amount of diversity, inflammation reducing foods, we know that that has a positive impact on your brain by helping those gut microbes produce anti-inflammatory molecules that signal to the brain both directly and indirectly via this long winding nerve that goes from your gut via the diaphragm all the way to your brainstem. This is the vagus nerve, this is the 10th cranial nerve. We know that when you're consuming those kind of foods, it helps soothe and calm your brain. Sugar, on the other hand, is going to be detrimental to those microbes that could be having that positive effect. So it could be that the lack of nurturing that gut microbe population is having the negative effect on mental health as well. Also, with the impact of weight gain, the excess palatability, the lack of fiber, the fatty liver, these are all inflammation producing things, and inflammation in excess is also associated with poor mental health as well. So you'll begin to see a lot of these connections between high amounts of sugar and worsening mental health as well. So one of the things that I would always think of is removing sugar from one's diet. Those are three things. The fourth thing is high blood pressure. Why am I worried about high blood pressure? Blood pressure is a silent killer, and it's also happening at a really, really early stage, even in adolescence. There was a study, a meta-analysis in children and adolescents, and the highest versus the lowest sugar-sweetened beverage consumers were shown to have significant increases in systolic blood pressure and a 36% higher risk of high blood pressure, also known as hypertension. There was another study that was published in 2014 in JAMA, Internal Medicine. Dr. Hu and colleagues found that over the course of a 15-year study, people who got 17 to 21% of calories from added sugar had a 38% increase of dying from cardiovascular disease compared to those who consumed less than 8% of their calories from added sugar as well. It is, again, hard to tease out the effect of ultra-processed foods from sugar alone, but it still stands to reason that we should be reducing our sugar consumption. And the reason why is because of the inflammatory effect of sugar as well. Why am I worried about blood pressure? Blood pressure, when it's raised, and a lot of people don't realize that they're having high amounts of blood pressure because it's one of these sort of silent killers, in that if I'm standing here with a high blood pressure of 160 or 170 systolic over time, that will erode my vessels. It will cause micro abrasions. And in those micro abrasions, where cholesterol flows through via your LDL cholesterol carriers, that's where cholesterol can get deposited into the vessel, and it can cause an inflammation cascade. And that inflammation cascade will create stenosis, also known as narrowing. So if this is my vessel, and I've got high amounts of blood pressure hitting these sides here, I'm getting lots of little bruises, and then a cholesterol molecule comes along and it lodges itself in there. That's what causes an inflammation cascade, and that excess inflammation will over time generate that immune response, and what you get is a narrowing. And this narrowing, if it gets worse and worse over time, can lead to significant blockages downstream. And this is what can result in, ultimately, a heart attack or a stroke as well. And this process is exacerbated, not completely caused by, but is exacerbated by high blood pressure and amongst other things as well, high amounts of inflammation and high levels of cholesterol, which is why we want to try and reduce cholesterol as much as possible as well. So sugar, as it pertains to how it impacts blood pressure in just one way, is another reason why we worry about narrowing of arteries and strokes as well. So reducing sugar may have a beneficial impact on your blood pressure as well.
Just a quick one. If you want to learn the 5 ingredients that I think are fantastic for inflammation that you should be getting into your diet every week, then download this PDF right now. It's in the link down there, and I'll send you my 5 ingredients for inflammation.
So we talked about 4 things already. The 5th thing is the detrimental impact on your gut. What happens when you have excess sugar and it affects your gut? Well, essentially what it can do when you're having too much sugar is it favors microbes, particularly in the earlier part of your intestines, the small intestines. It can favor microbes that rapidly use up carbohydrates at the expense of other organisms that are specialized in degrading complex carbohydrates, and they have slower growth rates. So if you're giving excess carbs essentially in the form of rapidly metabolizable sugars, you're favoring a different population that isn't actually associated with better health outcomes. And this shift creates a different environment in your gut. And that can lead to the development of these new microbes or changes in that existing gut community. And some of those changes can lead to harmful bacteria taking hold as well. There was actually a meta-analysis that found that high consumption of sugar was significantly associated with a risk of inflammatory bowel disease. Again, this could be due to the lack of fiber effect. It could also be due to the ultra-processed effect. It's quite hard to tease out what is ultra-processed versus the high amounts of sugar in these kind of studies. But it still stands to reason that we should be thinking about eliminating sugar if we're trying to improve our gut health. Okay, let's recap. So what I've told you is excess amount of sugar, and I'll talk to you exactly about what I mean by excess amounts of sugar. Excess amounts of sugar can lead to weight gain because of a number of reasons. That it's highly palatable, it lacks fiber, it doesn't have that satiating effect that GLP-1 agonists that live in your digestive tract actually have. It can potentially cause fatty liver, it can raise your blood pressure, it can affect your mental well-being, it can also have a detrimental impact on your gut. How much sugar should we actually be having? Well, there was a recent review published in the BMJ, and they said that we should aim for less than 25 grams of added sugar per day. Less than 25 grams per day, or less than 6 teaspoons. That's actually not that much. And considering where we tend to get sugars, you might be shocked about how much you're actually consuming. Now, the obvious culprits are going to be things like sugar-sweetened beverages. I'm just going to put a list down here actually. Sugar-sweetened beverages. These are SSBs, and you'll see that if you look up in the academic literature, they'll probably be referred to as that. You also find them in sauces, so things like marinades, pastes. Just look at the back of these packets, and then you'll notice sugar as an line item multiple times. You also find it in soups, salad dressings, flavored yogurts. This is probably one of the biggest sources of sugars that we find, because a lot of low-fat yogurts that are proudly labeled as having low fat or no fat whatsoever, they have to replace that flavor that fat actually gives by adding sugar to the yogurt itself. And if they have flavors, they generally don't use the genuine fruits because you have to preserve those and they don't really stay around for that long, hence why they add a lot of sugar. So you might think that you're doing the best thing. I'm having these probiotic-rich, dairy, protein-rich ingredients, but actually you're consuming a lot of sugar in the form of the additives that they add to these. There's granola bars and cereals. Gosh, these are absolutely laden full of sugars. Bars, fruit drinks. We'll talk about fruit in a bit more detail, but fruit juices, unfortunately, strip out a lot of the fibers that actually make them so healthful and actually make them beneficial for your gut microbes, particularly the mucin layer as well. So when you strip that out, all you're left with is the fructose that is naturally found in fruit. Now, this is the type of stuff that is very similar in its blood sugar spiking ability that sugar sweetened beverages also have as well. So fruit drinks are things that you want to avoid and actually only have as a luxury item. Even things like peanut butters and energy drinks, big sources of sugar in your diet. So if you just look at all these different things, sauces, soups, salad dressings, you might be mistaken for thinking that these are healthy items, but they all add up, which is why most of us are having more than 6 teaspoons of added sugar in our diet every single day. Another thing that I haven't talked about is bread. Why do I not like supermarket bread? First off, they are ultra processed in the majority of cases. So they have emulsifiers and thickeners and preservatives. So they're adding a lot of extra elements that you don't want in your average bread. Bread should just be a few ingredients. They also strip out a lot of the fiber because they use refined flours. So you're not getting any of that fiber that's going to be helping your gut microbes that you actually want. And they tend to have sugar added to them as well for a number of different reasons, for preservatives, for flavor. There's a whole host of different amounts of sugar that you'll find in these everyday supermarket items. Again, adding to the 6 teaspoons plus that we're having in our diets every single day. In the research, they make a very clear distinction between natural sugars that you find in fruits and different carbohydrates, for example, and those added sugars that I've just described down here. There's a very big difference, and I'm just going to point out an example that illustrates this. So in fruit, you might find in a typical apple that you've got 17 grams of sugar in, and then like a chocolate bar will have something like 30 grams. You might think, oh, if I have 2 pieces of apple, I'm having the same amount of sugar as I do in a chocolate bar. That's completely wrong, and there's a clear reason as to why. When you have 1 piece of fruit, you're going to feel satiated because of the excess fiber that you have. So not only has it got less sugar in totality compared to the same amount of weight as a chocolate bar here, but you're also going to have that satiating effect because of what I just described with what happens to your digestive tract, in your digestive tract with those different microbes. So that's the first thing. You're having less and you're going to be having much more of a satiating effect. And the other thing is that fruit has vitamins, it has polyphenols, and it's also part of a very complex food matrix. So a food matrix is essentially how everything is bonded together in a very intricate way, which is very different from the simplistic structure of a chocolate bar that can be rapidly absorbed. So not only does the chocolate bar not have those polyphenols, the excess fiber, the amazing polyphenols and vitamins and minerals that you have that are overall anti-inflammatory, it also has a very simplistic structure that's easily and rapidly metabolized by your body. Whereas the apple, you have to work harder to actually break down that apple, which is why it is always more preferable to have the fruit. And this is regarded as non-added sugar, and this is regarded as added sugar. So if you're going to have a fruit, this is not going to contribute to your 6 teaspoons or less every single day. Okay, let me get rid of my little man. He wasn't a very good little man anyway. Okay, so in a modern day food environment, it is really hard to cut down on sugar just because of how ubiquitous these sugars are in our day-to-day life, right? When you're on the run and you're like trying to grab something before you go to work, you often go for a pastry or often like promoted a healthy meal deal. It's very easy to fall into the trap, which means that you're going to be having lots more than 25 grams of sugar per day. So I'm going to give you a couple of habits that will make your meals more filling, so you're less likely to overconsume sugar. The first thing is, when you have your breakfast in the morning, you want to have protein and fiber breakfast. This is going to ensure that you're feeling satiated, that your microbes here are happy and they're producing those different satiating chemicals like the natural GLP-1s, and that's going to mean that you're less likely to fall into the trap of getting a sugar-sweetened beverage or a sugary snack or something like that that's going to put you on that sugar roller coaster as well. So make sure you're having protein and fiber at breakfast. A lot of breakfast cereals or breakfast items, they shouldn't be called breakfast items, and they basically are desserts. those are the things that you want to steer clear of. And I'm talking about refined carbohydrates like oats, instant oats as well. I love oats, but we tend to go for the jumbo rolled oats or the pinhead oats that are a lot harder to break down compared to the instant oats that are actually rapidly metabolized by your body, and they're pulverized so they're easier to digest, which means the sugars that naturally find in carbohydrates are rapidly put into your bloodstream in the same way that a lot of these sugary snacks are as well. So make your meals more filling by adding protein and fiber, particularly at breakfast. You want to remove ultra-processed foods as much as possible. It's easy for me to say this, but a lot of people don't realize what is ultra-processed versus processed, which is whole foods as well. There are certain foods that I think come up time and time again as being healthier for you. So things like coconut sugars and honeys and date syrups, these are all other names for sugar. Sugar is sugar in various forms. And despite honey having a few extra antioxidants and a few extra health benefits, when you look at the proportion of honey being glucose and sucrose, it's pretty much the same as table sugar. And biologically, it will have these similar effects as well whenever you're consuming them. So be wary of those ultra-processed foods that have those labeled syrups and honeys and all that kind of stuff. It all has sugar in it as well. Things that are labeled as low fat, my red flag immediately goes up. I should have a little, I'll put a little red flag up here, hold on. Red flag, there you go. Be careful of those. And the other thing are just swapping out sugary drinks. So anything that has energy on it or the typical drinks that we know of, Coca-Cola's, Pepsi's, Tango, Fanta, whatever you're drinking, that is a really simple way in which you can consume those sugars. So you want to make sure you're removing them as much as possible. And a lot of people don't realize that a can of cola or your typical sugar sweetened beverages have 40 grams of sugar in. So if you have one can, you've blown through your total added sugar consumption for the 24-hour period. It is way, way too much. I don't know how on earth they're getting away with it, considering the evidence is all pointing to less than 6 teaspoons per day. So it's mind-boggling as to how we can allow these to be served in vending machines and stuff. These are luxury items that should not be promoted, and if they are, they should have a much lower dose as well. The third thing is, if you're still looking for those sweet flavors, use fruits and use spices. So cinnamon, nutmeg, different fruits. These are ways in which you can add natural sugars into your diet that actually have fiber and actually have those anti-inflammatory benefits as well. The fourth thing is curating your sugar-free environment. I'm one of these people that has to ensure I don't have snacks or any sugar items in my kitchen, because I know what I'm like. I will overconsume. If I know that there's a chocolate bar or I know that there's a cracker or something like that in my kitchen, I'm going to be eating it. And that's just me. That's just sort of, you could call it a lack of willpower, a lack of motivation, but I know it happens to a lot of people as well. So where you can be really diligent and quite strict with yourself, I would limit your home environment to be sugar-free as much as possible, because outside of your home, you're at the mercy of marketers and you're at the mercy of whatever you have to consume. So if you can curate your sugar-free environment at home, that's great. And the fifth thing is just to be patient, because if you are someone who overconsumes sugar, your palate, your taste profile, your taste buds are attuned to the sugary foods that you're accustomed to. And it does take a little bit of time to change your taste buds to appreciate the bitter flavors and things like fruits and vegetables and high fiber items. And that's okay. Just be patient with yourself. Your taste buds will adapt to bitter profiles, and it will get a lot easier for you as well. Once you start, it can take up to a month. Sometimes it takes less than a week. Depending on your baseline, it can be different for everyone. The last thing I'm going to talk you through is 24 hours in actioning a low sugar strategy. So first off, breakfast. Instead of your pastries and your croissants and the cereals, think about nuts, seeds, spices, and fruits. You also want to try and get protein first thing in the morning as well. So it could be leftovers, it could be eggs, which are high in fat and high in choline and have a number of other benefits as well. It could be smoked tofu, it could be any number of those different items, but make sure you're always thinking about protein and fiber at breakfast. Super, super important. When you're having your coffee, skip the milk, skip the added sugar, skip the honey, skip the cream, skip the Oatly. These are all added sugar culprits. These are all areas where you're adding sugar to your diet where you don't actually consciously realize. You might be completely unaware that these are all adding extra teaspoons of sugar bit by bit. So I would say skip the milk and the added sugar as well. I'm just going to cross out sugar sweetened beverages there. If you are someone who drinks colas and orange juice and lemonade and vitamin water and energy drinks, try and reduce those as much as possible because these are all going to be contributing to that 6 teaspoons as well. So try and remove them. And if you get headaches because you're lacking the caffeine, try and go for coffee, or you can try some other caffeinated drinks like black teas as a way of getting that extra caffeine. But otherwise, I would remove them completely. If you get sweet cravings like I do after eating, whether it's after lunch or after dinner, try and swap the sugary dessert for something like a dark chocolate or something like a fruit as well. So having fruit after a meal or 75% plus dark chocolate after a meal. These are actually healthy things, and chocolate is one of the healthiest ingredients that we actually have, but it's the way in which we consume chocolate and the choice of quality of chocolate as well. Most chocolate in supermarkets is milky, so it's got a lot of added milk and a lot of added sugar. The 75% plus ones have far less sugar in, and they actually have a lot of prebiotic fiber, which is fantastic for your gut as well. So you want to make sure that if you are having cravings, which I do as well, I always have like this sweet sort of urge after a meal, I go for a good quality chocolate and I go for fruit as well. Do not be afraid of fruit. And just a final note on sweeteners. Sweeteners can be used in the short term to sort of help you remove the sugar in the early stages. At least you are reducing what we know has an impact on weight, on inflammation, on blood pressure, on fatty liver. But I wouldn't say it's a long-term strategy. There's a lot more evidence coming out about artificial sweeteners and how they may be having a damaging effect on your gut. Anecdotally, there are a lot of people who have artificial sweeteners in their beverages, for example, and they still put on weight as well. That could be because it doesn't get rid of that craving, and they go and overconsume in calories in other ways without really being aware of it. But there's enough rumbling that I'm not a big fan of artificial sweeteners today. I could change on that opinion, but I would say you want to try and reduce your craving for sugar in the first instance by focusing on whole foods as much as possible. So those are the things that I would say around sugar you want to be aware of, and you want to be making sure that you're not falling to the trap of where you're getting hidden sugars. Plus, think about protein and fiber at breakfast, reducing ultra-processed foods. And then if you're thinking about ways in which to reduce sugar throughout the day, think about your breakfast, think about cravings, think about replacing those cravings with chocolate and fruit, and then also be wary of artificial sweeteners. And right now, my opinion is that we should be avoiding them because of the potential impact on your gut.
If you love that episode, you'll love this one where I do a deep dive into honey and the benefits of honey, what to look for in good quality honey, and whether honey is actually worth the money.